Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I was going to film a video in the van, doing a little unboxing, doing a few projects in the van and discussing what, the plans were for the summer in the van, camping. But as you can see, Mother Nature had other plans. We're going to discuss something that I've had to get used to living on Vancouver Island. That's very different than when I lived in Calgary, Alberta. So in Alberta, in Calgary in particular, it's a very dry climate, very dry. I mean, your skin always feels parched and, you're always putting moisturizer on. You've got humidifiers in your house to try and add moisture back in. Even when it snows a lot, it's a very dry climate, and the snow is also rarely the heavy wet stuff. Vancouver Island, very different climate. And I knew that obviously, but never having lived in a humid climate, I wasn't really prepared for the realities of living in it in the tiny house. Well, in general, but in the tiny house in particular. I will start by saying that it was always the plan to move to Vancouver Island in the tiny house. So when I was having the house built, normally the house would have been sheathed in OSB, Oriented Strand Board, which is a product that's made from scrap wood, all glued together. The problem with OSB is it absorbs more moisture than plywood. And because I knew I was moving to a humid climate, I made sure to have my builder sheathe my house in plywood. Now, plywood is more expensive. Plywood is also heavier than OSB. But because I knew I was going to be in a climate where humidity was going to be a factor, I had them do that. I also made sure that we had the Lunos installed. The Lunos is a heat recovery and air exchange system. There are other brands on the market. There is two, one on the back end of the house, right by above the closet, and the other one in the bedroom. And every 60 seconds they switch off, pulling and pushing air so that there's always fresh air being circulated inside your house. It also helps with managing the moisture. There is a setting on the panel for really getting rid of moisture. My stove is propane and releases moisture into the air when I'm cooking, and then of course cooking releases moisture into the air, or if I'm washing dishes for a long period of time, then the air exchange system, the Lunos, will kick in to a higher mode to try and expel the moisture out. And so the sensor is attuned to the humidity inside the house as well. Also, the house is spray foam insulated with closed cell spray foam, which means that moisture can't get in. In a regularly built house that isn't using spray foam, you would have your insulation, you'd have your sheathing, your insulation, and then you'd put a moisture barrier, plastic moisture barrier inside. And there would be the Tyvek on the outside as well, I believe, to protect the sheathing. Because I have, of course, Sophie's gonna go into her litter box. You watch, she's gonna go in there multiple times because she knows I'm talking. We'll just pause and wait, and I'll drink my coffee while she's done. Where was I? Yes, we were talking about moisture and insulation. So in a regular house, you have the vapor barrier. Because the house is insulated with spray foam, I don't need to worry about that. Having a vapor barrier is not required because the spray foam, the closed cell spray foam, becomes its own vapor barrier and really does lock out moisture and prevent mold, which is a big thing, right? Because when you're in basically a rainforest, because this end of the island farther up north you get, the more humid it is. Yeah, we're basically there, or the beginnings of it. So that was an important thing as well. I also have a forced air furnace, and in the winter, having warm air blowing is obviously going to help dry out your house if there's moisture in it, and that's an important thing as well. And there she goes again. Number 2. She's not going number 2. She might be going number 2, but second time in. I'll be right back. I think she's done. Famous last words. I also wanted as many awning windows as I could get, which open this way versus this way or sliding up, because I know there's a word, sliders, or I don't know what these are. Because I knew that those I could have open when it was raining outside. That helps with air circulation, which brings me to another thing that the house has. It's got a hood fan above the stove and a bathroom fan, so that really also helps with getting moisture out. So if it's really humid and I'm cooking something that's releasing a lot of moisture, I will crack the kitchen window, sometimes this one as well, and obviously run my hood fan, and that will really help get the moisture out. So those are all the internal components that manage humidity. Where I was for the first while that I was here, my original parking spot was out by Chemainus, and so near Duncan and Chemainus. And I didn't have this problem, the humidity issues there that I have here. This climate is quite a bit more humid. I knew that when I was looking for spots. That was one of the considerations. It snows more and it rains more. It's just more into that climate, that sort of rainforesty type climate. So now that I'm here, this winter has been an eye-opener. I knew I needed more. Now, I have a small dehumidifier. It's the one that I showed you in the bedroom, but it was not doing nearly enough for the house. So what I ended up buying was another humidifier. And so I looked online and I found one that was well rated and quiet for the tiny house that would work in a space, because the tiny house is under 400 square feet, right? And that's including the loft. So I ended up buying this one, and it does work really well, but it wasn't enough. So I ended up buying a second one, and the second one is up in the loft, as you saw, because I needed to get the humidity out of the loft as well. And so now this one sits over on the counter, the edge of the counter here in the kitchen. The small dehumidifier is now in the bedroom, and there's that third one up in the loft. And that has made a huge difference. I usually empty this when we're having a lot of rain and it's really humid, I'll do it every day or two. They are all built to turn off when this gets to a certain level, so they won't overflow. But I'm pretty, I'm constantly checking them just to see how much moisture they're gathering. So I've got those. So we now have 3 dehumidifiers, 2 larger ones and 1 smaller one. So that was good. I've also bought, I think we all know what these are, right? You buy them in Canada here. You can get them anywhere, but I buy them at Canadian Tire. And they do work. But the problem is they're really wasteful. They're meant to be thrown out once the beads have absorbed all the moisture that they can. And that seems incredibly wasteful to me. So I was looking for one that I could refill, and I found this one. And then when I started looking at the beads that you buy to refill this, I realized I can refill those too. So that's what I do. You know, the first time I opened this up, I had to tear off the little liner piece that's on top, and that's basically to keep pets, kids, and things out of it. But you just tear that off and then lift that up. It takes a little doing the first time round, and then empty what's left of those, empty this, and then refill it. And I've been doing that now for a couple of months, and it's working great. So there's no reason to not refill these if you're going to buy them. Now, are they going to take care of all the moisture in the house? No. I still absolutely need the dehumidifiers. Absolutely. Because these are not enough to get rid of all the moisture in the house. But I tuck them into the corners. I have one in the bedroom, two in the living room there, and one by my desk. And this one either sits back in the living room or down here on the wheel well. And I know they're working because they fill up with water. So they're doing something. There's still moisture on the corners of the windows in the morning on really humid days. And so what was I doing? I was taking my microfiber cloth. I have one in the bedroom and one out here, and I was just wiping those up. Because using paper towels was such a waste of paper towels, and these work really well. But I saw on a couple of van life channels that these people had these for in their van, and it does get quite humid in your van, especially if you don't have a recirculating fan or when it's really like cold outside. And they were using these. And it's basically a squeegee that's meant for washing your windows and then squeegeeing up the water, but they work great for this. So what I showed you earlier, there wasn't a whole lot in the corners. Today's not a really humid day inside per se, but I've had some days where there has been, 2-3 inches of moisture around the corners and up the sides, and this works great. So I will squeegee vacuum up all of the windows, give them a little wipe with this after, and that's working really well, because my goal is to prevent mold from growing in the corners and anywhere in the house. That's been working for me. I have also recently bought some of these. They're hanging. Basically, they're these, but in a hanging format. I'm going to open this one because this one's going in the van. Because, of course, there's humidity in the van, and I have, my bed in there and my van build. And so I'm going to be putting this one in the van. And what they are is a little hanging version. So this is that fabric stuff. And this is where the water goes, and you just basically hang this where you can get some air circulation. I also put one of these in my bedroom. And I bought a 3-pack. I might put one of these up in the loft actually as well. So one in the van, one in the loft, and one in the bedroom, and see how much water they capture. Because again, in your vehicle, in a climate like this, it's going to be humid in there, and it's not like I can open up all the doors and windows and let things dry out, because it's raining and stuff outside. So that's something that I'm going to try. I just put the one in the bedroom, so I don't know how well that's working yet, but that's something that I'm going to try. Now, I do realize that I emptied these and refilled them with no gloves on. I get that. And it does say on there that it can irritate your skin. I'm very careful to wash my hands really well as soon as I'm done, and wash my countertop and everything like that. So this little device here is my humidity sensor. And you can see that today the humidity is around 70%. Inside the tiny house, it's 88% outside. And of course you want it in near where the light blue is, but since I've gotten this, I've never gotten it to right by where the light blue is. It's magnetic. It sits on the fridge or over on the stove, the oven hood fan. So it's just over 70% in here right now. I've had it when we had a spell of 2 weeks of just non-stop rain. That's when there was a ton of moisture in the air. This was at between 80 and 90%. So again, that's not a good thing in your house long term. That's not what you want. That's when I decided to order a second one of these and ordered this because I knew I needed other strategies. I was also not using my furnace that much because I didn't really need it. And I, have that little mini space heater that I showed you in my video about, being prepared when the power goes out. There's just no way that she needs to go this often. She never does this any other time, just so you know. It's not like she's diabetic and has to pee nonstop. She never does this any other time. She goes to the bathroom once in a while, and that's it. As soon as I turn the camera on, if I'm doing a cooking video or anything like that, she goes in there nonstop. All right, she's done. And pretty much so am I. I just wanted to go over some of the things that I do to manage the humidity inside the tiny house in this very humid climate. Because I do get questions about that quite often. And it really depends on your climate. I never had any of these issues when I lived in Calgary. Sure, when it got down to minus 35, minus 40 at night or in the winter, I would get frost on the windows and such, but everybody got frost on their windows in those temperatures. Didn't matter if you were in a tiny house or a large sticks and bricks. But when you move from a very dry climate to a very humid climate, your challenges are not just keeping your hair straight. They are keeping the moisture managed. My biggest fear is that I'll get mold growth. And so far, nothing so far. What I've been doing has worked. I really like having one of these up in the loft, and I do think that I'm going to put one of those hanging ones up there as well. We are almost out of this season. It does get humid here in the summer, but nothing like the winter, nothing. And so I think these strategies are going to work. I do recommend buying these refill bags and refilling these little dehumidifier tubs because while these aren't expensive, they're really wasteful to throw them out. So I have 4 of them. I never need to buy more. I have 5 of them, I guess, if I count this one, because I can just buy this. And a bag of this is not expensive and it lasts a long time because really, I'm only putting about a 1/4 cup in each of these containers. I will only replace them once I see that there's a fair amount of water liquid in there. I turn my furnace off because we're having our conversation, but as soon as I turn it back on, this will go down a bit, at least a couple of percentages because of the forced air. I will also sometimes, when I have the furnace on, turn the ceiling fan on in the living room there and circulate air around because that really helps. I don't have room for a huge dehumidifier. These ones are not expensive. They're well rated. I'll link them down in the show notes. I'll link this and this, a version of this if you can't find it in your stores. Obviously, a microfiber cloth, you can get these anywhere. The dollar stores where I got mine, and having those handy is good just to keep the moisture at bay. While it can be a little bit of work to keep on top of the moisture in the tiny house, it's not a lot of work at all because it's such a small space, and it is my skin feels amazing. I know I've mentioned this in other climates, but in Calgary my skin was always so dry patches. I was constantly putting on the heaviest moisturizers I could get. Here, I mean, I do still put on a moisturizer with hyaluronic acid just to lock in the moisture, but my skin feels so good, and my hair has never been curlier when I let it do its thing. So, don't think I'm gonna drive anywhere today. I don't know what the roads will be like, and I don't really need anything. So I'll bundle up, I'll go for a walk, and then I'm gonna read my book. So, and this is the book that I'm reading. It's called Unsettlers by Mark Sundin. Now, I've just started it, and it's really good. It tells the story of 3 families that have decided to live in a different way, a more sustainable way, and basically remove themselves from the constant consumerism and merry-go-round that is our society. It was written in 2017, so it's a few years old now, but obviously the stories are still fascinating and interesting, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's a really good book. I just finished a book called A Papa Goose. You can look it up online. It's a story about this researcher who becomes the dad to a flock of geese, goslings, eggs, and then he hatches them and imprints on them, and because they're gonna mount little sensors on them to gather information on weather patterns. It was really interesting. I read it all in one afternoon. It's not a long read, but it was really cute and really interesting. So if you're looking for something to read, look up Papa Goose in your library. I can't remember who the author is, but all you have to do is search Papa Goose. So guys, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you're still subscribed if you have already, because that seems to be a thing that's happening. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Share it with somebody you think might like it. Follow me on Instagram, My Big Tiny House Life on Instagram. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind, including to yourself. I love you, and I'll see you next time.